Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here today to talk generally about insurance. And this is health insurance, home insurance, auto insurance, all of these things. And I just want to cover a few different things. Now, before I get into the various points I'm going to cover, I want to let you know that Patrick and I did 2 different insurance related videos in the past. They're both at least 2 to 3 years old, and I'm going to link to both of them down below. One in particular was about health insurance, and then the other one was on prepping is insurance. So we were just talking about preparedness and how it in and of itself is insurance. And I want to make sure I link you back to that because I haven't watched the video in a long time. I don't remember what all we covered. It's always nice having Patrick in the videos too because he adds things that I won't always think of and vice versa, but it's really hard for us to coordinate our times anymore to be able to shoot videos together. And I want to go ahead and cover some of this at least a little bit again. For those who have questions or wondering about insurance, wondering what we do, and just to kind of get us to rethink insurance generally speaking. So let's go back in history a bit. There was a time where there was no such thing as homeowners policies and auto insurance and health insurance. What did people do without all these things? Well, they had something called an emergency fund, and usually this was put up in the form of cash that they kept on hand for emergencies. When it came to house fires, people usually pitched in and helped each other. It didn't necessarily mean everything got saved, but still, people took care of each other. And we still see this happen today for people who don't have homeowners policies in their house, or even if they do, but they fall severely short, people help each other out. We still do this today, and this is something that I'm not saying that we should always assume somebody's going to be there to help us, but we should at least be considering helping other people out. Because if you can't be there for other people when they are in need, how can you expect other people to be there for you when it's you that are in need? One thing about living in a small town is that whenever there's a big tragedy that happens in this town, and somebody needs help, people will pull together. And that's what I love about a small town. And they will do fundraisers to raise money that will help this person in their particular crisis. And I really love that about our small town. But again, you don't want to just always assume something like that's going to come through for you. You have no idea. You have no idea what kind of emergency can happen. One thing I'm going to say right here is that when it comes to any kind of insurance, it doesn't matter if it's auto, health, home, whatever it is, I'm sure you're probably all seeing that we're paying more and more into it, but getting less and less out of it. So let me talk a little bit more about preparedness. So again, as I said, emergency funds in a form of cash was how people took care of things when they came up. But they also had things that they didn't consider prepping. It was just part of the way we live. Today we consider it prepping, and that is simply putting up food from the garden. So I know that may not sound like it fits into homeowners insurance and auto insurance and health insurance, but it absolutely does. So if you're putting up things that you know you need to survive, be it food, making sure you have a good food supply on hand that's going to be at least, I always say at least a year. I mean, you have to start somewhere, even if it's only, okay, having a goal of I'm going to be 2 weeks ahead on my food storage, then move that up to a month. It's always good to start with short-term goals, because if you don't, you will feel overwhelmed trying to get a year's worth all at once, especially if you can't afford to do that. But it's starting small and building up to at least at some point having at least a 1-year food supply, or 2 or 3, and whatever you feel most comfortable with and that you have the space for. And so by having that food on hand, when something happens that's going to take the cash away from your monthly or weekly food bill, you won't need to use that for the food, you can put that cash into whatever this emergency crisis is, and then use the food in your food pantry. Then once things balance back out again, this crisis is behind you, you can start restocking your food supplies. That's just one way. Another form of your own personal insurance outside of any kind of policy is getting ahead on any kinds of bills. So for example, since we are still connected to public power because we're partially off grid, we're sort of 50-50 with the solar power and the other things we do that are more off grid, but we also have public power, which we do rely more on the winter months because we're not getting as much solar power collection. But thankfully we do have a wood stove that covers us for heat, clothes drying, and much more. And I'll go ahead and link to a couple videos down below about wood stove, the pros and cons video that I did, and some other ones if you're interested in that, because I do think a wood stove, and for most people, if they can do it, is a very good investment. But anyway, so that to us is a form of insurance right there, by the way, having that wood stove. So if we couldn't afford to pay the power bill, the heating bill, whatever, we've got the wood stove to fall back on. But also we are ahead on our power bill. So I always pay a set amount every month that keeps us always a year ahead on our public power. If something ever comes up and we can't afford to pay the public power, we're covered. That's just one way to do it. Or even if for some reason one month I simply forget to pay the bill, I don't have to worry about it. I'm covered for a whole year, but I still always do that. Same thing goes for the water bill. Again, with the water, we're half and half. We rely 50% on our rainwater collection and the other 50% is on the city water. And so we do use both, but if we had to and we couldn't afford to pay the water bill, or we weren't paid ahead like we are in the water bill for a year, then we could have the water shut off and we could survive off our rainwater setup if we had to. So that's one way. Just, having some regular monthly bills that are necessary bills that you're always paid ahead on is one way that you can help cover yourself and be insured in case something happens, and then you have to pour the funds from that would normally go into those payments into this other bill that came up, whatever it was. And then of course, if your house isn't paid off yet, really try to work on getting some payments ahead, at least a couple months ahead. I would say that should be key, because that's going to help keep you from losing your home as well as getting behind in the case you can't afford it for 1 month. That's why on any bills, you never know what's going to happen. You could be laid off of work, and being ahead on those bills is going to help take the stress out quite a bit, where if you don't have cash coming in, at least you know these bills are covered for a certain amount of time. So when we went to pay off the house, the first thing we did was I got ourselves actually 2 years ahead on payments on the house. Then once I got that far ahead, then I started putting everything onto the principal. And then once we got the house paid off, all that interest we paid in those extra payments ahead got paid back to us. Since we paid it off early, we got that back. I think it was like $2,000 we ended up getting paid back from the bank because we paid the house off early and because we were so many payments ahead. So that, it can work that way. So don't worry about getting payments ahead. If you do end up paying off your house, you will get that money back, or at least you should. Any excess interest that you had ended up paying as a result of being ahead. So obviously, if you can get completely out of debt, that's going to be super important. That is a form of insurance, because being out of debt is going to cover you in so many ways. It also frees up more money that, let's say your income didn't change as far as how much you have coming in, but now that you're debt free and you don't have so much money having to go out, that money can be set aside as a savings fund or in purchasing tangible assets that you can have to take care of you in the event of a crisis where having an insurance policy isn't going to help you. Now let me talk a little bit about those insurance policies. So for example, in our situation, obviously if you're still making house payments, you are required to have, at least here in the United States, I'd assume it's the same in other places, you're required to have homeowners insurance. But even after we paid off the house, it was still hard to let go of that homeowners insurance because it was kind of the security blanket. So I kept holding on to it and I kept holding on to it, kept thinking about maybe canceling it because we'd been paying in for so many years and never used it. Then came the winter of 2019. We had this big storm come through here. It was only for a day. I'm not even that long. It only lasted a few hours, and so many houses were affected as a result, at least as far as the roofs were concerned. Our neighbor, she had a brand new roof and lost, just big chunks were coming off of it, and it was brand new. Our roof, even though it had been on for quite a number of years, it was still within that time frame because it had a 30-year lifespan. It should have still been good for another 10 years, yet we lost big chunks of our roof. And so when we tried to make the claim to the insurance company, they basically turned us down. They didn't want to replace the roof, which in our opinion, the whole roof needed to be replaced, but they didn't want to replace the whole roof. They just wanted to patch it. They just wanted to do a patch job, which they said would cost less than what our deductible was, so it wasn't worth it for us to claim the roof. And we were demanding a whole new roof because that's actually what we really needed. And they refused to do it. After 30 years of paying into this insurance, we ended up having to pay the cash ourselves. And all that money we paid into insurance for 30 years was a big old waste, since we ended up having to foot the whole bill to replace the roof on our house, which we did. And we went with a metal roof, more expensive, but we know it's also going to last us a lot longer than the shingle roof that we had. But here's something to know, is that if we did not already have that cash set aside, that's our insurance. If we didn't have that, I don't know what we would have done. Well, we would have had to go into debt in order to get a new roof. As a result of that, though, we did go ahead and cancel that house insurance because, yes, though we understand anything can happen at any time, the problem is with the mentality of today is we've become so used to that way of thinking when that's not the way it used to be. People didn't have these insurance policies that they constantly were paying into, that if they didn't use it, that's all money that got thrown away, which is what happened with our house insurance. 30 years of paying house insurance was all a complete waste of money. And I did the tallying up on what we paid into insurance. And for the amount of money we paid in for the past 30 years, we could have replaced the whole roof on this house and on the shop as well, at least a couple of times over. And so why are we doing this? Why are we just throwing this money away? So when you look at it this way, when you have some kind of fund, whether it be in the form of cash or some kind of investment or tangible assets, this is an insurance that's there for you and you can't be denied it. So for example, your food storage, when you have to fall back on that, when something happens, it's going to be there for you. It's not like your food storage can say, oh, I'm sorry, we can't cover you because of this, that, and the other thing, or because we simply don't want to. No, it's still going to be there for you. Same thing goes with whatever type of savings account you have. It's all going to be up to you. I'm not getting into anything about digital currency or cash or gold and silver, but whatever type of fund, emergency backup fund that you have, that's still going to be there for you. Personally, I don't trust digital anything, so I think more tangible assets. That's my personal thought. Because as Gerald Celente says, if you don't have it in your hand, you don't have it. So that's something to consider. But I know people have their different things that they do in stocks, bonds, and so on. And that's, you know, some people know more about that kind of stuff than I do. Though I really like the idea of tangible, personally. Now let me move on and talk about our other forms of insurance. So we currently do have health insurance, but I'm seriously thinking about canceling it. Now, I don't think when we did that video about health insurance a few years back, we had health insurance at that time. Because at that time, we were kind of in this in-between stage. Pat retired from his job. He's actually retired, but we were waiting. We were kind of in this waiting mode right then. And we didn't have health insurance, but we have had a health savings fund for, gosh, I don't know how long now, at least 20 years. And it's been sitting there accruing interest over the years. We've only used it once or twice that I remember. Once to pay off our youngest son's braces when he had them, and we would have paid for the whole thing if I'd remembered we'd even had that. And I think we used it to pay something else, some kind of dental procedure that needed to be done. I don't remember what it was. But we have that to fall back on if we absolutely have to. And here's the thing I like about a health savings fund. It's kind of the same idea where you're not constantly paying into something that may or may not be there for you. You're paying into it, and it's a savings fund. We did go through this period where we were required, which is illegal, by the way, to have health insurance. For us, even though we didn't have the health insurance, the health savings fund was technically considered our health insurance. So in such a case, we didn't have to pay a fine at the end of the year for not having that health insurance. Now, once Patrick's retirement came through, we did go ahead and opt for getting the health insurance, but I've really been second guessing that because it takes a pretty big chunk out of his retirement check. And on the very rare moments we've ever used it, it's been pretty much worthless because it really didn't cover anything like this. It used to. It used to cover a lot more than it does now, and we hardly ever use it, so it's a huge waste of money for us to keep paying into it. So why do we keep doing it? Because we're used to having the security blanket. Yet, for the first, I don't know how many years of our marriage and having 2 babies during that time, we didn't have any health insurance, but somehow we made it through. We weren't making a lot of money at that time either, yet we got our bills paid, we made it through. And then auto insurance, again, I don't know how it is in other countries, but here, again, if you want to legally be able to drive your vehicle anywhere, you have to have auto insurance or at least liability, and which we do have, of course, but I know that there's other ways around that too, which I'm not going to get into here because I don't think I understand enough about it to talk about it here. But at least to save money on your auto insurance, I'll throw this out here. If your vehicles are over, I don't remember how many years old, is it 10 years? Something like that. There's no sense in paying comprehensive insurance on something that's an older rig. You got to consider the cost of the rig and what it would cost to have the whole thing replaced. A lot of times you're better off just going with the bare minimum, which is going to be your liability. And then the other thing is that some insurance companies will allow you, and in some states, it will probably vary from state to state, but here we are actually allowed to put different vehicles on suspension for a time, which means we're only paying just a minimal amount for them to just sit there, but we're not driving them. And then we can then reinstate the vehicle when we need it. So we do that a lot. We'll switch vehicles. We have a couple of different pickups. We have our Toyota pickup, we have our GMC pickup, and sometimes we need one more than the other, and so we'll switch back and forth, and we'll have one sitting on suspension. So that saves us maybe $50 to $75 per month having that one suspended while we're driving this one, and then vice versa. We'll switch them around. You're going to have to look into your own insurance for that. Now, for the auto, we have Allstate. Now, when it comes to auto insurance, Allstate has been very, very good to us, but we also had them for house insurance. And one thing I'll say about having them for house insurance, look for something else because you are not in good hands when it comes to Allstate homeowners insurance. You're not. Look for something better. Trust me. Now, I do believe there's probably other really good auto insurance companies out there that are at least as good as Allstate or better, maybe even have lower costs. Please share with us down below what do you have, how do you feel about it? Because we're looking at possibly, even though we've been with Allstate for years and they've actually taken pretty good care of us in several different situations that have arisen, but I'm still willing to look into something better that might save us more money. And that's the other thing you have to consider when you're looking at any of the insurances that you have to have, like your auto insurance and your house insurance, or you just don't feel comfortable not having. Always be shopping around. And so that's another reason why I'm putting this out there is I would like to hear some feedback for those, at least in the United States, that share with us what kind of insurance you have for auto. I know some people, by the way, for health insurance do a health share program. I looked into those. Some of them are Christian based. There was a few things about those I didn't like, and I found that they didn't save us any more money going with those than what we have now, but it's possible they could actually cover more than ours does. And that I would prefer, but I don't like the ones that require you to prove that you're a member of any kind of specific church. That bothers me because right now we're not a member of any church. I understand it, but I don't really agree with that, and I will never be a member of a church again, official member. Those are the two reasons why, is the cost didn't save us anything, and I don't have any proof of membership to give anyone, and I won't go that route. But for some people that could be a very doable option that could be better than the other types of insurances that are out there. So look into that. Please share with us down below if you have a health share program, who it's with, do you have one that doesn't require you to show proof of a church membership to be a part of. I would be interested in that if there is such a thing. And then homeowners insurance obviously has got to be a matter of choice. If you have your house paid off, like I said, 30 years and we never needed it, and then when we did, it wasn't there for us. And to me, it's a waste of money. Yes, we understand that we could lose, maybe the house could spontaneously combust and we could lose everything. At the same time, this is why we have other types of our own tangible assets and insurance in other forms. And I'm glad I finally broke free of that and got out of that mentality. And I also have faith in God to protect us, because, well, let's say our house does catch on fire. Well, obviously our house insurance proven that they're not going to take care of us in the event of a storm that took our roof off, which should have covered it. What if our house burns down? Are they going to find a way to blame us so that they don't have to pay? There's no way that you could be positive that they're actually going to come through for you, because if they can find a way out of pain, they will. And so I don't trust them. And I am glad to be liberated from them. So the next thing that's got to go is that health insurance. And then coming again back to the prepping, just remember that was what people used to do. They were self-sufficient. They had food stores. They didn't have all this debt over their head. They paid cash for things, and they had a backup savings fund in case something out of the blue happened, as well as taking care of each other, family members looking out for each other, friends looking out for each other. That's really what we should be doing anyway. But this whole idea of you have to have this, you have to have that, and you have to have that has gotten us away from that kind of thinking, that kind of, not only just being responsible for our own selves and taking care of our own needs and looking out for our own future, but trusting some company to do it for us that we shouldn't be trusting. They don't care anything about you. They only care about the money they can make off of you each month. And then also getting us away from looking at helping each other when we're in need, because, oh, well, they have insurance, they'll be fine, instead of helping that person. And then when it's our turn, they're helping us. I mean, that's really the way it should be. I think that's the way we were created and meant to be in the first place. All right, well, I hope this is helpful. And again, don't forget to check out the other two videos I'll be linking to down below. And if I can think of anything else I think might be helpful, I'll link to that as well. But to also share with us your own experiences in regards to insurance, or how prepping has been there for you as a form of insurance, what kind of policies you've had, what has helped you, what has not. So as people are coming in here and trying to figure out, how can we pull this off where we don't have to pay X amount of dollars every month, or especially if you can't afford to pay into that every month, what are some other options you can do that will work for you? All right, well, I think that was all I was going to say. So thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.